would like to begin with two quotations from Sri Aurobindo on Savitri. He writes, "No, I do not work at the poem once a week. I have other things to do. Once a month, perhaps, I look at the new form of the first book and make such changes as inspiration points out to me, so that nothing shall fall below the minimum height which I have fixed for it." He is telling us here that he has so much else to do, to see to the world, to the work of the world. He had to see to the defeat of Hitler, which he said if Hitler had won, it would set us back 1,000 years in the evolution. And again, the second quote from him, "Savitri is a work by itself, unlike all the others. I made some 8 or 10 recasts of it, originally under the old insufficient inspiration. Afterwards, I am altogether rewriting it, concentrating on the first book and working on it over and over again, with the hope that every line may be of a perfect perfection." And then he puts a dash and he says, "But I have hardly any time now for such work." And this is the greatest thing that was ever written in the English language. And Sri Aurobindo twice now says, "I have other things to do. I work on it maybe once a month. I have hardly any time now for such work." So when we read Savitri, we should read it with great humility and love and gratitude. So the first line begins, "Across our nature's borderline, we escape." Now, our nature's borderline is our mind, life, and body, our emotions, our desires, our fears, our resistance, etc. But where do we escape from our nature's borderline? The next line tells us, "Into supernature's arc of living light." And Sri Aurobindo tells us, there is a supernature behind all that is apparent, a supreme power of the spirit in time and beyond time, in space and beyond space, a conscious power of the self, who by her becomes all becomings, of the absolute, who by her manifests all relativities. And this is from the Life Divine. So now Sri Aurobindo is telling us again about Ashwapati. This now was witnessed in that son of force. Ashwapati is that son of force, the Lord of Tapasya, the concentrated energy of spiritual endeavor that helps us to rise from the mortal to the immortal planes. The next line, "In him that high transition laid its base." Yes, that high transition, that passage from one form, state, or condition to another. That is our definition of a transition. It's this passage that goes from one form or state or condition to another form. The next line, powerful, powerful line. Original and supernal immanence. Immanence here he capitalizes again. And there are two things that I want to share with you on this. Because the first one is belonging to the realm or state above this world or this present life, pertaining to a higher world or state of existence, coming from above, belonging to the heaven of divine beings. Can be heavenly, celestial, or divine. It also can mean lofty, of more than earthly or human excellence, powers. Now, Sri Aurobindo tells us in his letters on yoga and on himself, in the ancient Indian system, there is only one triune supernal, Satchidananda. Or if you speak of the upper hemisphere as the supernal, there are three, Sat plane, Chit plane, and Ananda plane. The supermind could be added as a fourth, as it draws upon the other three and belongs to the upper hemisphere. So now we understood that supernal immanence, because the immanence is the condition of existing or remaining within. Original and supernal immanence, of which all nature's process is the art. Yes, this is the process and the art of nature, capitalize N, to lead us to the divine, to the supermind, and afterwards to Satchidananda and above. But until her collaboration with Mother, her work was so slow, but she enjoyed it, trying out all the different species of plants and animals and more. And initially, she was hesitant to give up that lengthy, almost interminable play of hers. But now that she has agreed to collaborate with Mother, her work has joyously accelerated. And even a humble gardener can get a glimpse of the new beauty that is coming down. And if I may say, this too is how the Matrimandya gardens will come down. Not by mental ideas, but by a descent into those souls who will open to the Mother's vision. The next line, the cosmic worker set his secret hand. Yes, the divine is the cosmic worker. To turn this frail mud engine to heaven use. Well, Sri Aurobindo often uses the word clay to describe our being, and here he's using the term a mud engine to describe us. And it's a frail mud engine. In our descent into the human form, we are basically a mud engine that has to be turned into heavenly use. A presence wrought behind the ambiguous screen. Well, this presence has to work behind an ambiguous screen, or we would not be able to withstand the beauty and the light and the force that is still beyond us. And in Savitri, we find many, many lines where Sri Aurobindo says, even the earth would break because it's received fully the divine. It beat his soil to bear a Titan's weight. Well, this is Ashwapati's soil. So we had mud engine, we have clay, we have soil, all referring to the human being. We had the mud engine, and now we have the presence. A presence, capital P, is beating Ashwapati's soil to be able to bear a Titan's weight. More broadly, the word Titan may be applied to a being of colossal force or grandiose and even lawless self-assertion, Sri Aurobindo writes, or even to whatever is huge or mighty. And now we have in the glossary and index of proper names in Sri Aurobindo's works, where he writes, the old writings called the Titans the elder gods. So they still are. Nor is any god entirely divine unless there is hidden in him also a Titan. Wow. Essays Divine and Human. Refining half-hewn blocks of natural strength. As we have learned now who Ashwapati is, the presence is refining his blocks of natural strength, which were only half-hewn. And hewn here means to sculpt or to shape. So he's shaping these half-hewn blocks of natural strength, and therefore it built his soul into a statued God. Now, a three-dimensional form or likeness, modeled, carved, or cast in material, such as stone, clay, wood, or bronze, is a statue. And it can also be, in a figurative sense, like a statue. The craftsman of the magic stuff of self. And here we have another epithet for the divine. He's the craftsman also. This is the divine who can craft with his skill and dexterity this magic stuff of self, our human bodies and spirits, who labors at his high and difficult plan. But he works at it. He labors, he strives, and often it is a difficult or arduous work or effort. And then we have, in the wide workshop of the wonderful world, 4 W's, most beautiful alliteration. And just feel the beauty of this line with its marvelous alliteration and the acknowledgement that this is truly a wonderful world. And what does he do in this workshop? He modeled in inward time his rhythmic parts. So the divine is refining half-hewn blocks, and we see that he is modeling, planning, constructing, fashioning, or shaping Ashwapati's already rhythmic parts. And as a result, there came the abrupt, transcendent miracle. Sri Aurobindo has not capitalized the word transcendent here. So we understand it as surpassing others, preeminent or supreme. The next,
Narad,
yes,
inward time. I did not understand inward time.
in time. Well, he is not working in outward time, the time that we usually understand.
Okay.
He's working within on his rhythmic parts.
Okay.
And then came the abrupt transcendent miracle. And there's a colon here. The masked, immaculate grandeur could outline, and so we have three things here. We have an immaculate grandeur. So we have immaculate as is defined as free from mortal blemish or impurity, pure, undefiled. And grandeur here is capitalized. And therefore it is the essence of nobility or greatness. The quality of being magnificent or splendid, grand. And what is this immaculate grandeur outlining and how? He's doing it at travail in the occult womb of life. You know, travail means painfully difficult or burdensome work, toil, labor, strenuous work. The divine is not doing an easy thing here. He could outline at travail in the occult womb of life his dreamed magnificence of things to be, a crown of the architecture of the worlds, a mystery of married earth and heaven, and therefore he annexed divinity to the mortal scheme. So when we annex something, we tie it. So now the divine is tying divinity to this mortal scheme of evolution. And this is the promise and the realization of Sri Aurobindo and Mother. So now what has happened? A seer was born, a shining guest of time. Well, Ashwapati, the Lord of Tapasya, as was Sri Aurobindo, who had to find the way of the integral yoga. Let me end with this saying of his in his book on himself. And there you will find much more. But he says, nobody has found this yoga a grand trunk road. Neither X nor Y nor even myself or the mother. All such ideas are a romantic illusion. And then, you know, he also spoke of how he researched more than any scientist his path to the integral yoga. In fact, he writes in letters on himself and the ashram, quote, I think I can say that I have been testing day and night for years upon years, more scrupulously than any scientist, his theory or his method on the physical plane. This is so extraordinary. And I'll leave some room today for your questions, but let me close with these words of Sri Aurobindo, because we all have to understand something in our human way of what the avatar has to face. We have had sufferings and struggles, to which yours is a mere child's play. I have not made our cases equal to yours. I have said that the avatar is one who comes to open the way for humanity to a higher consciousness. If nobody can follow the way, then either our conception of the thing, which is also that of Christ and Krishna and Buddha also, is all wrong, or the whole life and action of the avatar is quite futile. X seems to say that there is no way and no possibility of following, that the struggles and sufferings of the avatar are unreal and all humbug. There is no possibility of struggle for one who represents the divine. Such a conception makes nonsense of the whole idea of avatarhood. There is then no reason in it, no necessity in it, no meaning in it. The divine, being all powerful, can lift people up without bothering to come down on earth. It is only if it is part of the world arrangement that he should take upon himself the burden of humanity and open the way that avatarhood has any meaning. Vladimir, can you say a few words on this magnificent passage of the divine's work in Ashwapati? Especially from the Vedas, perhaps.
It's quite interesting that in our studies of hymns to the mystic fire, we just read the passage of Ashvamedha seer. So Ashvamedha is the one who illumined with the knowledge his vital force, and he did it with the help of two luminous firmaments of heaven and earth. They are considered to be two luminous grounds, which are helping the space in between heaven and earth to bring light and power, to enlighten the vital power, and to give all our vital force, all our vital desires, feelings, emotions to the divine. And it's quite interesting that Ashvapati is the lord of that force, which is illumined in him. He has given all his vital force to the divine, and that's why he can realize basically the highest.
Yes.
This is to be considered in the Veda the crown, the transformation of the vital, when it is illumined, when the union of heaven and earth is taking place, this mystery of married earth and heaven, when they are one, as Sri Aurobindo says in another place, yes, heaven and earth are equal and one. This is the Vedic vision, how we can transform this life here. And it has to become full of luminous force. I think that was his major work, to bring the transformational power into our midst. And that creates the life divine, that life force has to become the divine.
And for me, it necessitated even his putting his body into the earth, into the soil of the earth. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to leave. And yet he said that it was necessary and that mother's body was stronger than his, and she would have to carry on the work. And she did it for another 23 years. Do we have any questions from our group? Never be afraid to ask questions, because if I don't have it and Vladimir doesn't have it, we will find it in Sri Aurobindo and Mother's writings. We will always be honest, always honest. If we cannot answer it, we will find it for you. So I think our time...
when we rise in these upper hemispheres, like in the Satchidananda, there is also this downward pull. So, in this, when you talk about this universe rising to a new kind of supermind and something. So how we people who have this experiences with downward pull, the challenge which comes up with the upward and downward pull, how we can get some understanding from this text?
Okay, first tell me what you mean by downward pull. It's not a descent, but it's a pull downwards? Is that what you mean?
Yes, descent is something where the higher consciousness is coming down, but a downward pull is something other kinds of forces. I mean, it's not an...
Yes, understand. The downward pull is something of our vital nature that tries to inhibit our inner progress, our rising up to the divine. And that downward pull, the downward pull cannot be transformed or changed by our own effort. It must be through a surrender to the Divine Mother that this can be changed, because it is perhaps the most powerful thing that is inhibiting us. And so only Mother can lift that from us. But we have to trust fully in her and in the divine grace. And then the downward pull will cease or diminish gradually. Sri Aurobindo says it's a long, long process. And we have to be prepared to go through it.
There is one more thing which I may mention to this downward pull, if you don't mind.
Yes, surely.
And regarding the downward pull, there is this mystery of the secret of the Veda, and that within the darkness, within the deepest darkness, there is the hidden supreme sun. We are all drawn to that sun. We do not know about it, but we are secretly drawn, as Sri Aurobindo describes, to this face peering through night. He was drawn to that unknown factor. You remember how Narad answers in the book 6, why we are drawn to this darkness. There is something there which is awaiting, and wants to manifest. And that is the hidden sun within the darkness, which Sri Aurobindo discovered. And by the way, the whole secret of the Veda was discovered, because in that cave of the darkness, the rishis with Brihaspati and Agni destroyed the cave with Indra and released the herds of the sun. And they established a new sun in heaven, a new dawn. And that is something which is drawing us down, which we want to discover.
Could you explain a little bit about the robbers of the deep?
Yes, that's also a very mysterious figures, panis,
Yes.
who Sri Aurobindo identify as the karmendriyas, as the indriyas of action, our hands, our feet, our word, our procreatory organs. So these are the karmendriyas in the Sankhya. But since they were built from within, from the inconscient, they do not know anything else but how to rob the light, whatever comes to us. They rob and hide in the subconscious cave. By the way, he beautifully describes this in Savitri in Book 2, where all these powers are activated in the darker nature, in the lower vital nature. And nature itself knows only one thing, how to catch something which is luminous and hide into her darker bosom, because this is the way how she accumulates enough light to transform itself. So it's again the same mysterious story, why we are drawn to the darkness, And once rishis come down, Angirasa rishis with Indra and Agni and Brihaspati, and break open that vala, that subconscious cave, these treasures of light which we accumulated over millennia, or maybe even millions of years from the beginning of time, are becoming released, and we see another world.
Thank you, everyone. We'll meet again next week. This passage continues so beautifully for many, many, many more pages of Aswapati's progress and Sri Aurobindo's experiences. Namaste.
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 Namaste.